I've got to say I'm absolutely delighted to have this opportunity to share with each of you here today on CBD, this rapidly emerging, by the way, and very confusing topic. I'm going to dive right in and begin by playing this short video about Bryce.
Doctors say he accidentally ingested a joint. The dog's owners say they brought him to the vet after he started acting strangely.
And that's when the veterinarians realized he'd probably eaten marijuana. Katie Brace has more tonight from Stoughton.
Bryce loves tearing up the yard with a game of fetch.
He's 110% on the go.
So when he started staying still for Julie and Jim Hardy to dress him in a shirt, they thought he was acting odd. That thought quickly changed to concern.
He was limp. Didn't eat. That's a telltale sign we had a problem. Coaxing to go outside. He started swaying and you could see the paw going out. And he was losing control.
The bizarre behavior earned Bryce a trip to the Tufts emergency vet, where this photo was taken. Julie, who has a medical background, had a theory the dog got into blood pressure medicine. She was in for a surprise.
Nope. Your dog's stoned. So she said, if you don't have it in the house, where would he get it?
Jim took Bryce to the local park, and the couple's convinced by the picnic tables the dog ate the rest of a marijuana cigarette. And the vet told them it's become all too common.
She said at least 5 times a week we see it.
The couple says they were lucky, as the vet told them, unlike Bryce, some dogs come in with seizures and renal failure.
I absolutely felt compelled to let people know that, wow, you just don't think about it.
Bryce did not consume a lot of pot. 10 hours later, he had slept off his high.
He is absolutely perfect and back to his very normal self. Huh, baby?
Wow, you just don't think about it. This video really sets the stage for the reality that cannabis is here. It's here to stay. It is very easy to be confused, and that's in part because a mass entrance of a variety of products have entered the marketplace that if you really think about it, it's enough to make your head spin. When it comes to cannabis and CBD, there's really actually a lot to know to sort it all out correctly. First, I'm going to discuss some terminology to get you up to the speed and pronunciation of terms associated with cannabis. Then we're going to dive into a little bit of cannabis history here in the United States so you can understand how we got to where we are at today. Then we're going to get into the real meat of the presentation, where I'm going to discuss the science of CBD. And if you're not a scientist, or if like science scares you, by the time we're done, you're going to love science, because I'm going to make it real simple for you. And then we will complete and finish everything up with a CBD legal brief, helping you understand from a high level, a federal level, what's legal and what's not as of this very day today. So let's get started with some terminology. Cannabis is simply the genus name for a flowering plant, with the species of interest being Cannabis sativa. And those two terms are very important and specific because all legislation is exclusively written utilizing just those two and only those two terms. As a plant, cannabis itself contains approximately 500 different natural components, 200 of which are compounds called terpenes, and there are about 113 identified cannabinoids. And I'll get into that a little bit more. What's important to note on this slide is that marijuana and hemp, they're both cannabis. The difference is that marijuana has a THC content greater than 0.3% on a dry weight basis, whereas hemp has a THC content less than 0.3% on a dry weight basis. THC being the only psychoactive cannabinoid found within cannabis of the 113 different cannabinoids. The ideal from a veterinarian is that you want to make certain you're using products that have THC less than 0.3% if you're going to use it for yourself, or in particular our furry little friends, with 0 THC being the ideal preference. Now, of the terpenes found within cannabis, beta-myrcene is one of the terpenes that makes up about 65% of its overall content, meaning most, if not all, whole plants, full spectrum products in the marketplace are going to contain beta-myrcene. And that's actually a huge problem, because beta-myrcene is listed as a California Proposition 65 carcinogen. This is something we believe most manufacturers in the country are completely unaware of at this particular juncture. Now, cannabinoids themselves are simply a diverse class of chemical compound. There are basically three different types. There are phytocannabinoids. Those are cannabinoids that come from plants. There are endocannabinoids, and I'm going to talk about the endocannabinoid system in a little bit. These are cannabinoids that the bodies of all mammals actually have the ability to internally produce ourselves. And then there are synthetic cannabinoids, which are a whole new field on the horizon of medical discovery that's actually quite exciting. Of interest and import for us are really two of the cannabinoids, THC and CBD. THC is delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. It's the only psychoactive cannabinoid found within cannabis, and it interacts primarily with CB1 receptors found in the brain and the central nervous system, hence the psychoactive association, and a few organs of the body, though there is some co-localization interaction with CB2 receptors. And then there's CBD, the reason that most of you are here today. That's cannabidiol. Now, cannabidiol is a non-psychoactive cannabinoid. Non-psychoactive. And it interacts exclusively with CB2 receptors. And CB2 receptors are found in more peripheral organs, and most importantly, cells associated with the immune system. So I want to talk for a few minutes, a brief history of cannabis here in the United States, in particular CBD, so you can understand how we got to where we are at today. Now, cannabis itself is actually one of the most ancient medicinal plants known to man, with recorded history usage going as far back, believe it or not, as 400 AD. It's been around for a very long time. And here in our country, up until 1937, it was actually the third most prescribed medicinal here in the United States, with approximately 2,000 preparations made by some 280 different producers, including major pharmaceutical firms like Parke-Davis, Squibb, Pfizer, and Eli Lilly, well-known names. Now, all of that came to a screeching halt in 1937 upon implementation of something called the Marijuana Tax Act, which was later replaced in 1970 by the Drug Enforcement Administration's, the DEA's, Controlled Substances Act, marking an 80-year absence of the ability to be able to do research and development here in the United States. That's a long time. And that all by itself should answer a lot of questions that you might have, like, how do I know this? How do I know that? Where's the data for this? Where's the data for that? Well, that's a tough one because we've had an 80-year vacuum in our country and a very negative stigma that has accompanied that vacuum for a very long period of time. Now, meanwhile, while this was the state of affairs in the United States, in Israel, researcher Dr. Raphael Meshulam from Hebrew University was diligently at work studying cannabis because up until this point in time, this was back in the late 50s and early 60s, nobody had done it yet. He was well aware of the many, many purported medicinal benefits that went as far back as 400 AD. He was also quite aware of the psychoactive association with cannabis, and he wanted to get some answers. Well, in 1963, he elucidated the structure of the first identified phytocannabinoid, plant-based one from cannabis, cannabidiol. And then the following year, in 1964, he finally identified the structure of the only psychoactive cannabinoid in cannabis, THC, delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. So what exactly is this endocannabinoid system that I've mentioned to you? It's a body-wide molecular signaling system that exists in the bodies of all mammals, in your bodies and in the bodies of all of our furry little friends. And what it does is it upregulates and downregulates all of our various body systems in a modulatory role to maintain system-wide balance, something we call body homeostasis. And as a result, it fine-tunes various vital physiological functions on a moment-by-moment basis. Now, this may not be really impacting you yet, but you need to understand we're looking at a new horizon of medical therapeutics on a system-wide level now, as opposed to simply talking about symptoms. Some people that are very, very sick, they can be on 6, 8, 10, 12 different medications, not necessarily to treat the disease that they're dealing with, but they're treating symptoms, and the medications that they're taking are affecting their body, so they have to take something else to counteract the effects that they're receiving from the medication that they took to treat the symptoms. Well, now we have before us this horizon where we can start thinking about treating the systems of our body. It's absolutely an incredible field that we're looking at, and we're right on the very cusp of the beginnings of it. So how significant is this system, and what sort of purported medicinal benefits are available anyways? Well, probably not very much, because we had an 80-year vacuum in our country, right, for the ability to do research and development. However, that's not the case in other places around the world, and in fact, over the past 60 years, there has accumulated a body of some 23,000 published studies that range the gamut on a whole variety of potential medicinal benefits that can be realized from CBD usage and other cannabinoids and engaging this endocannabinoid system. So you can see it's all over the map, but that makes sense, right? If this is affecting all of our body systems. But just how significant is this? How important is this? Are we just talking about, Doc, a single standard deviation difference, or maybe I wish and I hope that this is good? No, we're talking really significant here. And to help you understand, I don't have time to go into all of these, but I'm going to pick on just 3 of these, and I'm going to drill down a little bit to show you the magnitude. In 1980, Dr. Meshulam did some landmark research on epilepsy in difficult-to-treat forms of seizures in children, like Dravet syndrome, where these children had no hope of relief from seizures because no medications work, basically. He found that in these children, CBD had very profound ability to actually help them. But it took about 38 years for a pharmaceutical firm, the GW Pharma, which is a British pharmaceutical firm, to actually adopt this research, do something about it, and create a drug based upon it called Epidiolex for treatment of treatment-resistant forms of seizures in children. He also did some other research in 2006 on type 1 diabetes. That's immune-mediated diabetes. Well, he found on average that these type 1 diabetics, only 8% of their pancreatic cells were viably capable of producing insulin. Whereas he found that in patients taking CBD, we moved from only 8% to 77%. This is almost a 10-fold increase by one natural nutraceutical. Another interesting study was done in 2014 on graft versus host disease. Dr. Yershurin found that in patients taking CBD, that number drops from about 1 in 2 patients down to just a little bit over 1 in 10, 12%. So again, these are very exciting, significant findings. Now it's time to move on to discussing a little bit about the science of CBD. Not all CBD products are the same, and we're going to see that's because source, extraction method, and blend make a big difference. The second major point I'll cover is more is not necessarily better, and that's because CBD demonstrates this very unusual thing called a biphasic dose-response curve. But at the end of the day, it's really all about absorption. And the bottom line is CBD in humans and in animals is very poorly absorbed orally. But we have more delivery mechanisms available to us in humans. But before I go any further, I need to take the pulse of the audience a little bit and see just how aware you are. So is it okay if I give you a test? Okay.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
It's easy to miss something you're not looking for. And if you don't know the right questions to be asking, right, you won't have any idea what you should really be looking for. In this world of CBD, where we've been flooded with products, you need somebody, actually you need a lot of companies, to tell you what should you be looking for. And that's my job as I start drilling down on our three major points. The first of which is not all CBD products are the same. Not all are created equal. Yes, CBD is a compound, so logically you would think, well, how can it be different from another CBD? Well, you're going to see. But first of all, the initial question you should be asking is, how do you know, Doc? Well, I'm not making this up. This is straight from the lips of the FDA. In 2015, 16, and 17 consecutive years, the FDA did product consortium studies where they pulled product then in market channels off of shelves, and they took a look at the labeling and they did chemical analysis, and they found fully 80%, 8 out of 10 products on market shelves in market channels were found to be completely illegitimate, meaning they had very little to no actual CBD in them, and the ingredients not matching up with labeling. And that's gotten even worse since the signing of the 2018 Farm Bill, which I'll get into that as we move toward the ends of the presentation. And this is because source matters, extraction methods matter, and blend matter. The obvious also matters, company credibility. And not everybody has the same credibility. This is a multi-billion-dollar exploding industry, and everybody wants in, and a lot of people that are entering it really are not quite qualified to be there. Now, when it comes to source, I'd like to point out that hemp is a very powerful bio-accumulator, meaning it acts kind of like a vacuum cleaner to remediate or to remove, if you will, toxins, pollutants, heavy metals, pesticides, herbicides, and even radioactive debris out of the soil. All around Chernobyl, hemp fields have been planted for this very purpose. So if you were buying a product with raw materials sourced from some unscrupulous individual that owns the hemp fields around Chernobyl, hey, I can sell it to these Americans for pretty cheap. You have no idea what you're getting, and unfortunately, we have a very poor regulatory structure in place right now. We're in dire need of some regulatory oversight to ensure safety to the public, and I will get there. So what should you be doing? You should be looking for whole plant, and you'll see why I'm saying whole plant in a few more minutes. Whole plant blends of botanical extracts from lawfully cultivated industrial hemp that's been grown to pharmaceutical grade standards, produced here in the United States under approved state pilot programs. Okay? Now, you see a little dollar sign there. Obviously, that's going to mean that this product will cost more than the cheap stuff that can be sourced from overseas. And you may not be aware of this, but most products here in the United States actually have their raw materials sourced from overseas because it's very, very cheap. And we happen to sadly live in this culture where price seems to dominate an awful lot of things. That's why the Walmarts of the world have been so successful, because they can sell stuff very, very, very cheap. You're going to see where I'm going to head with this in a few minutes. The dollar signs are going to begin to accumulate. And I'm going to try to convey to you that a good quality CBD product is going to be very expensive. Now, just because something's expensive doesn't mean that you have a guarantee that it's going to be good. But what I can guarantee you is the opposite will be absolutely true. If it's cheap, inexpensive, it's cheap product, and you probably just want to stay away from it. It's just common sense. So source matters. Extraction methods also matter, and extraction methods are all over the map. The mom and pop outfits might be using Mr. Juicer to get squeezed plant juice out of it for locally produced materials, to ethanol extraction. I think the more credible companies that are out there are probably going to be utilizing something called supercritical CO2 extraction as a methodology, and maybe you've heard of that before. Supercritical extraction, due in part to the process utilized, which involves pressure, and whenever there's pressure, there's heat that's generated. And it only takes temperatures above 115 degrees to damage phytonutrients. So you could have a beautiful labeled product on a shelf that looks like it's got great phytonutrients, but if it utilized an extraction methodology, which, by the way, supercritical extraction is very, very expensive because it involves very expensive equipment to do, you could be consuming or giving to our furry little friends a product that's been damaged goods. So what do, right? Well, you want to look for extraction methodologies that are even better, and they are actually out there. Unfortunately, as you see, there's another dollar sign that popped up. They're even more expensive, but there's just to pick one, there's an extraction methodology called subcritical cold pressed, and that's a CO2 extraction methodology, but it's a CO2 methodology that's been done in a cold pressed vacuum so that the temperatures can be kept below 104 degrees to avoid heat damage to phytonutrients. If you could find that kind of a product, that would probably be a pretty good thing. So source matters, extraction methods matter, and blend also matters. Just a show of hands, how many of you are familiar with the Entourage Effect? Oh, wow. I was expecting I'd probably see about half the hands go up. Okay, well, this is really good then, all the better that you're here today. Entourage is defined like this, that the sum of the parts produces a complementary effect that's greater than that of a single compound, like CBD as an isolate alone, all by itself. Think of it, if you will, like a symphony, where you go and you might listen to a French horn, and that could be wonderful, a wonderful experience. But that is a world different from listening to that French horn in harmony with a whole bunch of other instruments in a symphony. So that's what Entourage is. So what do you do about this? Well, here's another key point. You want to be looking for blends that are capable of producing Entourage. You're going to be far better off, right? But you see another dollar sign there, all right? First of all, you need to have companies that understand, well, wait a minute. We have 200 terpenes, 113 cannabinoids. How in the world do you get there? How do you know which combinations of what produce the best kind of Entourage? Good question. And then, even more important than that, how do you create the plant hybrids that are going to output the raw materials in the right proportions to give you that kind of Entourage? It takes a lot of science and a lot of understanding. So the net result is, again, a good quality CBD product is going to be very expensive. The second major point, okay, is that more CBD is not necessarily better. Really? Yeah. And that's because CBD demonstrates something called a biphasic dose response curve. Well, it basically means this. As you start consuming more and more CBD, you get to an optimal dose, beyond which, if you consume more, there's no added further benefit whatsoever. Just totally wasted goods. Now, we know roughly in animals what that optimal dose is. It's sort of all over the map. It's all the way from 0.02 milligrams per kilogram to 2 milligrams per kilogram, depending on who you talk to around the world. That's a 100-fold difference of opinion, by the way. And the 2 milligrams per kilogram was on the heels of a Cornell study that was done just a couple of years ago. And since that point in time, they have since changed to adopt a recommendation for an initial starting dose of 1 milligram per kilogram. So now, but we still have a 50-fold range, right? This is very different from how we normally think about compounds or supplements or drugs, where the more product we take, the more and more effects that we see. So you could have two products at the exact same price, both 1 ounce bottles. One might have 1,800 milligrams of CBD in it per ounce, and maybe the other one has 150 milligrams per ounce. I would assume, if you're like me, the tendency is, well, I'm going to go for the one that's got all the stuff in it. And I can guarantee you, 1,800 milligrams in an ounce, it's going to be a lot of wasted goods, because the bodies of our furry little friends just can't assimilate that quantity and make use of it. Now that comes to our third point. At the end of the day, it's really all about absorption. And this is probably the single most misunderstood part about anything to do with cannabis or CBD. And the better the absorption, the better the bioavailability. That sounds like a big word, but basically what that means is the more available biologically a substance is to target cells that it's intended to act upon. So the better it can get absorbed into the body, the more easier it is to be able to do that job. And there's no doubt delivery mechanisms affect absorption. And we have delivery mechanisms, they're all over the map. You know, we have intravenous delivery, we have inhalation delivery, we have sublingual delivery, transdermal delivery, oral delivery. Okay, we've got a lot of them for people. But that's not necessarily the case with our furry little friends unless you happen to be the owner of the cool dog on the block, Bennett.
Bennett! Bennett dinner!
Hey.
Every time I see this video, this just cracks me up. I want to meet Bennett. Don't you want to meet Bennett? He's just the cool dog. Well, the bottom line is the point I'm trying to make here is in animals, we're limited with our delivery mechanisms. And if you don't know this, if you didn't know this prior, you're going to know it now. CBD is very poorly absorbed orally, and it's a big problem. Okay? Now, why is it poorly absorbed orally? Well, first of all, CBD is not water soluble. It's a fat. Fats and waters don't mix. Fats and lipids don't mix. Number two, it's significantly impacted by gastric acid immediate as soon as it's ingested. And then, now this sounds real scientific and kind of like geeky, but I'll make it simple. It undergoes something called very high first pass metabolism effects by the liver, which I'm going to talk about next. As CBD is taken up into the digestive system, it's absorbed in the portal vein right here, taken directly to the liver, and it undergoes very high metabolism with the end result of very little actually making its way through the liver to be available biologically, bioavailable, there's that term again, to the body. Think of the liver as being the border control agent of the body that just doesn't want CBD crossing its borders, even if it's a mad cow driving that CBD. That's just sort of the way that it is. Now, only 4 to 12% of what is orally ingested, whether it's you or animals, of course, if you're ingesting it, maybe you're going to take it sublingually, but our furry little friends can't successfully do that. Only 4 to 12% of what is orally ingested actually makes its way to sites of action. On a good day with a really good product, and you've already seen how difficult that might be to find, 12 milligrams might get there, right? The rest just ends up being sort of lost in space. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the old series Lost in Space. I'm dating myself, you can probably tell by my hair. And it just gets eliminated from the body. Now, as a point of comparison, intravenous bioavailability of compounds is always 100%. If any of you ever have to have those dreaded colonoscopy, talk to your anesthesiologist and say, hey, give me propofol. That's 100% bioavailable because it gets directly into the bloodstream. Also, sublingual and inhalation bioavailability is pretty high as well too, ranging between 60 and 70%. 60% for sublingual and 70% for inhalation. Now, for anybody that you may know that has angina pectoris, chest pain associated with cardiac disease, you know that these individuals carry nitroglycerin. This is nitroglycerin nitrostat. So what do? They take these tablets sublingually because sublingual absorption is so much higher. All right, so it all boils down to the science of CBD. I mean, that's really the reality. It distills down to how a product that's been sourced from a good source, how you then extract it, how you blend it. Have there been technologies to enhance it further? And there are. And are there technologies to enhance oral delivery so that the oral delivery works even better? There are. So as a recap, so far, not all CBD products are the same. You can see that's because the source, extraction method, and blend make a big difference. More is not necessarily better. Don't get hoodwinked into believing that. And that's because of this very unusual dose-response curve that CBD demonstrates. And at the end of the day, it's really all about absorption. And that first-pass metabolism effects of the liver, it's pretty profound. So let me change gears just for a few moments because I said I was going to talk about marijuana toxicosis. How many of you have seen marijuana toxicosis in animals? Wow, good. A lot of you. This is good. Yes, it's not good that we've had to experience it. Thank you. But for those of you who have not, I want to give you some statistics and help you understand what it looks like so that when you do see it, you will know what to do. In 2017, the ASPCA Poison Control Center fielded 1,486 calls related to some sort of marijuana or cannabis toxicosis. That number actually rose to 1,800 calls in 2018. That's a 21% increase in a single year alone. So if any of you here don't think this is a real and a growing danger, you've been asleep at the wheel and not paying attention, because it is. In fact, it is because, number one, products are becoming more readily available, and number two, they're actually becoming more concentrated and potent, and here I'm talking about the THC content. I'm talking about human products here. These animals will present with lethargy, maybe some breathing problems, blood pressure irregularities, abnormalities in the heart rhythm, loss of balance like Bryce. Bryce couldn't propriocept the paw properly. He was just stuporous and kind of out of it, and some urinary incontinence. But it can get much, much worse than this, and you need to be aware of it. And I want to apologize to everybody in the room right now before I play this next video, but it's intentional, because when you see severe marijuana toxicosis, you're going to know what it looks like and you're going to know what to do. And this is a video of a dog with severe marijuana toxicosis. This dog needs to be seen by a veterinarian now, and these individuals who filmed this dog may have had I assume they had very good intentions, but they would have been far better off spending their time driving this dog to an emergency veterinary center rather than becoming like the YouTube stars to show this. But you can see this dog is out of it. Complete loss of ability to even upright itself. You probably saw, I think I was talking, some of these tonic seizure convulsions of the musculature. These dogs will be severely ataxic, won't be able to regulate their body temperature, will be drooling, that's what tyolism is, vomiting, have diarrhea, all the way to coma, organ failure, and even death, okay? It's a serious and it's a growing issue. And the culprit is THC, and the moral of the story, here's another one of these keys to put in your memory bank, is just simply avoid THC, right? Only use products with a THC content less than 0.3%, but that's not good enough for me, a veterinarian. I'm saying use products with no THC. They're out there, right? So if you've got a choice, pick the ones that don't have any THC. You could have little Fifi get into a whole boatload of 0.3% cannabis, or I should say hemp, that would be the proper term for it, and little Fifi could get him or herself into some trouble, right? But if you've got products with no THC, it's sort of a non-issue. So that brings us now to the fourth part of this presentation, would be a CBD legal brief. And I did mention that we work with whom I believe to be one of the top cannabis attorneys in the country. I've become very good friends with him, Rod Kite, K-I-G-H-T. You can easily find him by doing some Google search. He's absolutely brilliant. So we're going to address now, on a federal level, I'm not going to address any state issues, what's legal and what's not in regard to everything CBD. And the issue really being addressed is whether raw hemp and hemp extract, including CBD and all of the other phytonutrients that are derived from hemp, are now lawful to transport, process, sell, and use in the United States as of the enactment of the 2018 Farm Bill. We're going to take a look at how the 2018 Farm Bill alters and impacts positions held by the Drug Enforcement Administration and by the Food and Drug Administration in regard to hemp and its derivatives, including cannabidiol, including CBD. Think of it, if you will, think of the DEA, if you will, as being the police force on a federal level for determining what's legal and what's not legal regarding compounds that pose risk to public health. And it does this through the agency of something called the Controlled Substances Act, whereas the FDA is more like a lifeguard charged with protecting and promoting public health using various instruments to do that, only two of which are relevant to cannabis and hemp-associated discussions. And those would be investigational new drugs and the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Now, the 2018 Farm Bill, signed into law by the President on December 30th of last year, states the following. The plant Cannabis sativa L, there are those two exclusive terms again, and any part of that plant, including the seeds thereof and all derivatives, extracts, cannabinoids, isomers, acids, salts, and salts of isomers, whether growing or not, with a THC, a delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol concentration of not more than 0.3% on a dry weight basis. That's the law. It's pretty straightforward. You see that 0.3%. I've mentioned it a number of times. So the real tipping point is the amount of THC. Now, the Farm Bill also contains a Controlled Substances Act exemption for hemp in any part of that plant, meaning the term marijuana, which is still a Schedule I controlled substance, that's the most dangerous of all substances on the level of LSD and heroin, by the way, no longer includes hemp in its definition. And hemp is now simply defined as cannabis having a THC content less than 0.3%. Therefore, hemp extracts, including all of their associated cannabinoids, no longer fall under the purview of the Controlled Substances Act of the Drug Enforcement Administration, and they are now federally, underline that word, lawful, provided they simply do not contain concentrations of THC in excess of 0.3%. Now, since the Drug Enforcement Administration is responsible for domestic enforcement of the Controlled Substances Act, it is clear from the 2018 Farm Bill that raw hemp and hemp extract and all of the other associated phytonutrients, including CBD, are now federally fully exempt from the purview of the Controlled Substances Act. So it's kind of like, well, the DEA is off the table now, okay? So we're cool with the DEA. Let's now discuss the agency responsible for protecting and promoting public health, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. Now, the Food and Drug Administration is responsible for protecting and promoting public health by ensuring the safety, efficacy, and security of human and veterinary drugs, that's part one, and part two, by ensuring the safety of our nation's food supply. Now, here's where you've got to pay close attention. Any product marketed with a claim, any kind of a claim of therapeutic benefit to diagnose, cure, mitigate, or treat disease, it's considered by the FDA to be a drug and must first undergo investigational new drug testing to be approved as a drug before it can be marketed and sold as such. And then any other similar products, like the one that was just approved, okay, not having gone through investigational new drug processing that happen to contain the exact same compound or compounds, are prohibited from being marketed as a drug. Some of you, that might cause you to wonder, well, wait a minute, didn't Doc mention something about an approved CBD drug called Epidiolex? Uh-oh, does that create an issue? Does it? Well, let's see, okay? Let's see if it does create an issue. Regarding Epidiolex that's made by GW Pharma, a British pharmaceutical firm, it's important to note a couple of things about Epidiolex, which, by the way, contains 100 milligrams of CBD per ml of solution, per cc of solution. First of all, Epidiolex is made from CBD isolate that's been derived from marijuana. And second, the lawful status of CBD and other cannabinoids depends on whether its source is lawful hemp or illegal marijuana. This is something that's referred to as the source rule, which you can find in the 2014 Farm Bill and the 2018 Farm Bill, if anybody is looking for clarity on that. So, investigational new drug concerns potentially created by the presence now of an approved CBD drug, Epidiolex, do not apply to hemp-derived CBD products for the following two reasons. This is how it gets simple. Number one, Epidiolex is made from CBD isolate, which is a single compound that's very different in kind from that of hemp extract that contains CBD plus a lot of other phytonutrients. And Epidiolex is made from illegal marijuana. It has a THC content higher than what? 0.3%, right. It's made from illegal marijuana. So we're talking about apples and oranges here. They're two completely different things. Therefore, hemp extract, including CBD and all the other phytonutrients that are derived from hemp, are not subject to investigational new drug jurisdiction so long as they're, number one, not being marketed as a drug. So if you're looking at products out there, stay away from all of the products that are making any kind of claim, like helps with, treats this, this is an just stay away from them. They are breaking the law. Probably many of them are well-intentioned, they just don't realize it, because it's very convoluted and complicated to figure out. But when you spend enough time, and I spend a lot of time trying to figure things out so I can make them simple, right? So long as they're not being marketed as a drug, and so long as they're not in violation of some other FDA provision. Now, though hemp is no longer an illegal substance under federal law, the federal law of the Drug Enforcement Administration, the FDA still has the right to oversee cannabis products through something called the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. So far, right now, we're 2/3 of the way there. We talked about the Controlled Substances Act. We talked about investigational new drugs. Now we're going to talk about the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. That's the purview that the FDA has been given to oversee cannabis products. And as of right now, at the present time, this act prohibits the inclusion of CBD in foods and dietary supplements. What, Doc? I'm carrying CBD chews. Oops. Don't shoot the messenger. This is the law as of today. This is the law. Now I know, because I've done this with my wife, you know, we go into grocery stores, I see CBD infused teas, we go into Bed Bath & Beyond. I don't like going there, but my wife likes going there. And at the checkout counter, we see CBD infused this and that and all sorts of things. They're all breaking the law, sadly. It's a reality. So, when it comes to products being marketed, anybody that's making a claim of therapeutic benefit regardless of the source, that product is considered a drug, and it must first be approved by the FDA as an investigational new drug before it can be sold. And the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act prohibits the inclusion of CBD, regardless of the source, whether it's marijuana or hemp, in foods and dietary supplements. So Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act concerns, when it comes to hemp extract and CBD, do not apply to hemp extract and CBD and the other phytonutrients associated with hemp, but only so long as no therapeutic claims are being made. I'm repeating this over and over and over. That's a big no-no. And only so long as the products are not marketed as foods or dietary supplements. Well, that doesn't give us very much to work with. That's right. It has to be classified as or called something else other than being a food or a dietary supplement. So the 2018 Farm Bill redefines hemp extract and CBD and other phytonutrients derived from hemp, removing them from the purview, from the oversight of the Controlled Substances Act, making them now federally legal in all 50 states, but only so long as no therapeutic claims are being made, so long as the products are not marketed as foods or dietary supplements, and then so long as CBD is sourced from legal hemp and not illegal marijuana. It's really as simple as that. So what's legal? The same three things that I've been saying: products that make no therapeutic claims, products not marketed as foods or dietary supplements, it has to be called something else, and products sourced from lawful hemp and not illegal marijuana. So there you have it. We went through some terminology, cannabis history, some of the science of CBD. You should have some memory tags for what to look for and questions to ask, and understand why all CBD products aren't the same. We finished up with a CBD legal brief, and my last note for you is the reality is that most producers are, unfortunately, because they're all over the map size-wise, right? We got little mom-and-pop places, the big pharmaceutical companies. Most are at a loss because cannabis science is so complicated, involving so many multiple disciplines, and this is a new emerging, this whole endocannabinoid field is new compared to other sciences, that it does demand very sophisticated scientific understanding to navigate it all properly. And you add to that all of the widespread misinformation that's all over the internet, and it's a recipe for disaster, unless, of course, you came to today's seminar. Well, thank you very much for your time.